Hi everyone, this is Rossi with beginning lessons in drawing, and today we're doing part 2 of this video about how we can draw a pear. And there's actually 3 videos. One is about thumbnails, which is the first one, deciding how we're going to lay out the composition of this pear onto our drawing paper. Part 1 of the pear video covers this drawing that I've already done, how to translate your thumbnail so that you can see it a little bit better, how you use the thumbnail to lay out your page, how to do some citing so you can get the proportions of the pear correct, contour line, getting the edges and curves of the pear, and then cross contour, this kind of gridding that I've placed on my pear. So we covered all of that in the pear video number 1. And today in this video, I'm going to cover how to start using value. So how to use hatching and cross hatching in order to make this pear have value and start to look more volumetric and more realistic. Today I'm going to be using graphite pencils, and I'll be using a B pencil, a 2B pencil, 4B, and 6B. And these are your softer pencils. All of your Bs are going to be pretty soft. Soft pencils whose lead is soft means that they're darker, and they go up. The higher the number, the darker the pencil is going to be, and the softer the lead's going to be. So B is a soft pencil, but 2B is going to be softer and darker than B, 4B is going to be softer than 2B, and 6B is going to be your darkest one. So when we are going to start, and we're starting to look at this pear, we want to really think about where are the lighter and darker parts of the pear itself. So if I look at this object, I can see that the area here on the pear is darker. Then this area is kind of in the mid-tone, coming down here as well. And then there's highlights here and here. There's even more than that. We can break that up even further, but those are the major areas of value that I see right away. And I'm actually going to use planar analysis, really thinking about the planes of the pear, and I'm going to draw in the shapes that I was just showing you. So I'm going to draw in this darker shape that's kind of taking up the bottom part of the pear, and I'm going to draw where I think that value is a little bit darker. I'm going to draw the upper part of that shape where I thought it was a little bit lighter. It gets a little bit lighter right here around the butt of the pear, has a highlight up here. It gets a little bit lighter on the bottom, and I'm giving myself these big, well, they don't necessarily need to be big, but these areas where the pear is lighter. Why am I doing that? If I have that as a plan ahead of time, I can then make a decision about when I need to use a lighter or darker value. So when I'm starting on this pear, I'm going to start here in this middle value, because the entire pear is going to be covered in some kind of value. It's basically all, like we can imagine the whole thing has a mid-tone. And then I'm going to be adding these darker areas with a softer pencil, a darker pencil, and then using an eraser to actually bring out the lighter values again. But I want to talk about why we have this cross contour grid, what it's for. It's actually a guide to tell us how our hatching and cross hatching lines should change slope. So when we're doing hatching and cross hatching, I'm just going to do it here. This is a demo, so even if I make some marks on this page, it's really to just show you. I'm going to switch to my other pencil so that it's nice and dark and you can see it. But when we're hatching, we're making paired lines that are next to each other. So this is what we would call a hatch. And then a cross hatch is when you cross those hatch marks. And you can do it over and over again to get it as dark as you want. So graphite pencils, a lot of people use graphite pencils and they like to smear them. And graphite pencils don't actually like to be blended like with a tool. They really don't. They would much prefer that you layer them in order to achieve the value that you want. And I'll show you how. So I'm going to start with my B pencil. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus on it. B pencil. Here it is. I'm going to start with my B pencil. And like I said, I'm going to start here in what I see as the midtone. And I'm going to use hatching at first. And my hatch marks are going to follow the curved areas, the curved lines that I have created to show the volumetric nature of the pear. So in this little rectangle, I see that this line, or this section, is at an angle that's, I don't know, probably about a 30. And then, or maybe less than that. And then the one next to it starts to slope upward. The one next to that is sloping upward as well. Next to that one. And I'm gonna change direction following the shape of this pear. And this way I can develop a midtone for the pear itself. And part of the reason why I was asking that you make your cross contour lines about 1/2 inch to 1 inch apart is because it's much easier to create hash marks that are about that size or smaller. Once you get bigger than that, it becomes really difficult. So all of a sudden I'm using I'm changing direction each time. I'm changing direction of these lines following that cross contour. After I develop all of that value, I will change direction and follow the other cross contour lines, the ones that are going almost horizontally while these ones are going more vertically. And I'm still going to follow them. So in order to build up that value, I'm going to go in the other direction. And you'll start to see that that cross contour line is basically going to start to disappear because I'm blending it with the graphite. And it itself is graphite, and it's going to slowly kind of go away. So don't worry about those lines being there. They're a guide for you. On this video, I made those lines pretty dark so that you could see the lines themselves. But when you're working at home, I would do your cross contour with an HB pencil or a B pencil, and then slowly, as you're using softer pencils on top of that, they will disappear even more. So again, I'm hatching and I'm cross hatching, and I'm following the cross contour lines. Okay, so kind of wanted to give you an example of that. I'm going to just show you what happens when I increase pencils. So we decided that the area in here was a little bit darker. As I switch to my 2B pencil, you'll start to see that it is itself darker, and it's going to allow me to get that graphite value to be much darker. So I'm going to still use hatching and cross hatching. The more times I layer, the darker it's going to be. And let's just switch to a 4B pencil so you guys see what happens when I use a darker or a softer pencil still, which is also going to be darker. And then let's go to a 6B just so you guys can see the difference between that as well. So not only can layering and using that graphite pencil over and over again, using hatching and cross hatching, that's gonna make you be able to go darker, but also increasing the number of the graphite pencil itself. The higher number is going to be softer, therefore darker. Okay, so we will do this all over the entire pear, and I can actually avoid areas that I think have a highlight, or I could let them have value and then go back in with an eraser and erase so that I'm lifting that value back up. So in this case, I have a graphite eraser that came with my graphite pencil set, so I can use an eraser to slowly lift up and make a highlight. As you're using graphite pencils and as you're using hatching and cross hatching, what you want to think about is that you really do want to follow the curve of your object, whatever that is, because as you make marks that are horizontal, like let's say I make horizontal marks, those horizontal marks are always viewed, and you can always see them as being flat. So if you make big horizontal marks, it will flatten out a space. Now, we might want that. We definitely would want that for something like the shadow. So the shadow that we see on the side of the pear, we want to make big horizontal marks. What we don't want to do is make big horizontal marks in the middle of our pear, like in an area that's supposed to be very curved, because our eye is going to perceive that as being flat. Same thing with vertical marks. Anytime we make big vertical marks, we see that as a telephone pole or side of a wall, and so that's going to flatten out our space. Big horizontal marks are going to flatten out our space. Instead, we want to make sure that we're following the curve and really thinking about how something's curving, and also by keeping the hatching and cross hatching shorter, smaller, it's much easier for our eye to perceive that space as curving. So in my next video, I'm going to do a time lapse of the entire process. So tune back in for that to see how I go from this step where I have just this grid line or starting to use value to a finished product. But what I want you to think about is use hatching and cross hatching, follow the contours of your objects, let the graphite blend itself, so use that graphite to blend instead of smearing it with your fingers or with a piece of newsprint or something else. Also, never use your fingers to smear. There's oils in your fingers that, as you transfer those onto the paper, can start to degrade the paper quality itself, and over time they'll yellow. So you don't want to smear with your fingers. It's also bad for you. You can kind of lose your entire fingerprint. I've done that many times. So instead of blending with your finger, when you're using graphite, don't blend. Don't blend with an instrument. You could blend with an eraser while you're erasing, but you don't want to blend with your finger. In future videos, I'll talk about charcoal, and charcoal loves to be blended. It's a fantastic medium if you want to blend, and we'll talk much more about how to blend. Blending absolutely is part of art. It's just not for graphite pencils. So tune in for the time lapse of this pear. Thank you.